5 victories, and some of his victories were absolutely astounding. His victory years, by the way, were 1969, then 71, 72, 73. His last victory coming in 1975.
Eddie Merckx commentating for the French-speaking Belgian channel there, RTBF, and will be looking, I think, quite intently down this line here to see if he can recognise the shape of his own son, Axel. And Eddie obviously very happy a few years ago when Axel Merckx came up to the finish line here in Ons in 7th position. A day for him when he really was proud that his son carried the name Merckx.
And I'm afraid we can't hear what Eddie is saying. He's on a different soundtrack to us, so we can't tell you. But at least you get a chance to see the man who, in my opinion, was the finest cyclist we ever saw in action.
And I have to say, for once, Phil, I totally agree with you.
Wow, that's a great change. Thanks, Paul.
Rolf Aldag in the middle there, and the pink jersey for Deutsches Telekom, just rolling along and keeping at the front as they go through the feeding station. Always a very dangerous part of the course here for these riders, because when men are switching left and right across the road trying to make sure they can pick up their bags, it is always a dangerous situation, and very often this is where many crashes do happen.
One man with his hand out, and nobody's going to give him anything by the look of it. Seiko rider, here he comes.
Not too happy with the way that was taken on board, and looking back rather angrily at the soigneur to say, next time, please do it properly.
Now, this is one of the few of the single-day classic races where you'll see a Kelme jersey at near the front there, the green and white stripes. They fielded, in fact, a 6-man team at the start this morning. 5 Spaniards and a Colombian. And which one that is, well, your guess is as good as mine right now.
Well, at least the one thing we do know is the man leading the race is a Russian, and he's still starting to build up a very good lead indeed. He hasn't come up to the massive proportions that we would have expected, and the attack now coming from none other than Richard Virenque.
Well, it's good to see Virenque. He needs a bit of form in those legs. He hasn't had much in the way of results this year. It's not unusual for Richard.
But he's always a great rider. He wants to get out and attack, especially when the television cameras are there. You know, you have to remember that magnificent attack he made towards the end of Milan-San Remo when he got out of the front there. And the Italian rider who joined him decided he wasn't going to work at all to the success of that breakaway. And Richard sat up on his bike just like a conductor at a great orchestra and started waving to the crowd saying, "What can I do? What can I do?" But he is a great showman. And it's good to see he's happy to take part in the aggressive nature of a race like this.
Nicolas Loda of the Balan team, just gone off our picture there. There he is.
Once again, Rolf Yerman from Casino getting up there. Well, there's confirmation. In fact, the time has moved out quite dramatically now. Bouvard 1 minute and 32 seconds behind the leader, Evgeny Berzin, and we're still waiting for confirmation of just how far behind the main field are. Berzin riding very sensibly, making sure that he doses his effort, because he's got another around about 1 hour 20 minutes to go before the finish of this race here, so he doesn't want to push himself too far too soon, because a lot of the major difficulties are really in the last hour of racing. And still no major team coming to the front in the main field here to take up the organisation to try and pull back the lead of Evgeny Berzin. They'd probably feel that by the fact that he went out so far from the front, he's just naturally going to weaken as we get closer to the finish.
A little bit more pressure going on the front now. The riders behind, I think, probably eased off going through the feed there. There's been an acceleration at the front, and now they're having a little bit of a problem getting back on. But there's definitely signs of a counter-attack now, so this could be where the race is beginning to go off in search of the Russian runaway. 5 riders here, Paul, trying to get clear, but they're all looking at each other again to come and do the work, and as a result, we're going to have a general regrouping.
Well, certainly very strange tactics. I think everybody thinking now about the Côte de l'Orsay and then the very long descent down towards the town of Aiwal and the climb up the Côte de la Redoute, because that is certainly where you can make some major damage. Looks very much like Laurent Debian of Cofidis coming to the front here, a man who was much to the fore last week in Paris-Roubaix. Comes from not too far away from here in Roubaix, just across the border in France, and marked quite admirably by one of the Lotto riders. And I think that's Andrea Perron from the Française des Jeux coming across there. just to make sure that Française des Jeux have some men in these little counter-attacks that are starting to form behind their leader on the road, Evgeny Berzin.
But once again, as we've seen in all the classics this year, the chasing groups have been very, very tenacious indeed. People who have won the classics this year have had to work so hard to break the spirit of the men around them, and it looks like Liège-Bastogne-Liège is going to be no different. Here's the man who's escaping at the moment and keeping out of sight because he's not that far ahead and has not gained that much ground. Just over a minute's lead, in fact, for Evgeny Berzin. He's got himself back in his little time trial mode because this young man really can ride a super time trial given the freedom of the road. And one or two of these may be beginning to realise it now that perhaps Berzin is refining some of that great form. Evgeny Berzin out of sight but not out of mind on this occasion. They're still holding him at just over a minute the advantage. We're just a few kilometres away now from the start of the next climb, which is the Côte de l'Ossay. And once we're under that bridge, Paul, I think we get onto the climb, don't we?
That's right. They flicked left underneath the bridge there, a little right-hander, and then he's straight onto the Côte de l'Ossay. Not a very difficult climb, but certainly one with 50 kilometres remaining once we get to the summit. And we're still getting a little bit of picture breakup. Don't adjust your set. It is because of the link-up from the motorbikes. These are live pictures we're looking at the moment. And reaction now coming from one of the riders from Psycho trying to get across.
Well, the Psycho rider looks like Eddie Mazzolini as he goes through our camera. Now, who's come up with him here? And it could be Andrea Brognara, but it doesn't matter anyway because they're all back in the pack. It's one of those days when they've allowed the Russian to get away. It took him 3 attempts before he finally got away. But everybody else who has a little dig, they're just bringing them back into the pack. No trouble at all right now, and it's still a very big field.
That's the area where the Côte de l'Ossay starts from. They go alongside the railway line there, and in a very short while they'll turn left underneath it, as Evgeny Berzin did just a few moments ago. But let's not forget, there's another rider out to the front of this main field, and we tend to forget about that, Gilles Bouvard. And the last official time check we had was Bouvard was 1 minute and 30 seconds behind the leader, Evgeny Berzin. And I'm not sure what the time check back to the main field is, but it must be touching the 2-minute mark now.
That's what poor old Gilles Bouvard is riding very well indeed. We're not getting any sight of him at all just at the moment. So Bouvard has been caught. This is the steep slopes now of the l'Ossay. These little hills abound in this region of the Ardennes, and you can spend a wonderful day on your bike touring them as well. There's the field, and they're saying now it's a clear 2 minutes 28 seconds. So Bouvard lost ground quite rapidly. They've swept him up. And now we're looking at a near 2.5 minute gap. Now, you said that Berzin needed 5, Paul. Well, he's halfway there.
He's certainly got half of that. And the thing is, there's still no team really making a concerted effort at the front. Michele Bartoli here coming up to have a word with his own teammate who's riding on the front there at the moment. That's Bettini. And I don't think he really wants him to do too much. Joined as well by David Tani. They're setting a little bit of a tempo there, but it's not fast enough really to start to eat into the advantage that Evgeny Berzin has over the rest of the field.
Well, if Bartoli is feeling okay, you'll certainly know now or not, whether he is or not rather, because he is the most consistent rider in the classics this year. And if he is feeling okay, then he's going to have to go to the team he's got left around him and say, it's time to get to work, boys, and bring back the leader.
Another Casino boy deciding it's his turn to try and get out of the front. This is Rolf Yeerman. So obviously, because of the fact that his own teammate Bouvard was caught, he's decided to launch out on the attack himself. It really is the tactic of the Casino team. Whenever there is nobody from that team in the front of the race, they launch out these little counter-attacks all of the time. But Once are not going to let anybody leap off the front quite like that, and they've sent a man up there too.
Well, this is the next tester now on the climb of the l'Ossay. 6 riders putting themselves together, and they're starting with a disadvantage of nearly 2.5 minutes. Now we've got 7. And in fact, I think if the truth were known, we've got the whole field there. Here's now the team car of La Française des Jeux talking to... I suppose they're talking in French. I'm not sure whether Berzin speaks French. He certainly speaks Italian.
Haven't heard him speak French at all so far. His English is not quite all that brilliant either. And mostly he has been very conversant in the Italian language. But it's quite amazing how quickly a lot of these riders, once they change teams to a different country, do manage to pick up the language. And at the end of the day, it is very easy to communicate with riders in Italian, Spanish and French, because a lot of the cycling terms are very similar.
Still going up at 2:45 now. We're heading up towards 3 minutes. The field continuing to not exactly slumber, but certainly just keep a useful rather than great tempo on the climbs. Otherwise there wouldn't be so many of them left in this group. They're halfway up the Lorsay here.
Still, it's just ones and twos of all these teams coming to the front. Nobody really wants to put the hammer down. I think once we start to get a little bit closer to the Côte de la Redoute, we'll see at least one team start to become a little bit more dominant. Over the top of this climb, the Côte de l'Orsay, there's 15 kilometres before we get to the Côte de la Redoute, and that, I think, is when the race will really start to get serious.
And there's somebody else decided to put in a little bit of attack here, and it looks like it's US Postal rider. It starts to move away. And I'll tell you what, we've had one or two good boys from US Postal have a little dig. This is the Polish member, Dariusz Baranowski, who has won one or two good stage races in his time, but hasn't yet quite made it on the top international circuit in Europe at least. But he is a good bike rider, and he's decided he's going to have a little dig here now and see what can be done.
One of the riders that the organiser of the Tour de France, Jean-Marie Leblanc, feels could be a great classic rider of the future. Currently the Polish national champion, looking very comfortable here. A strange move by him, because Evgeny Berzin has a very big advantage over the main field at the moment. 2 minutes 45 at the last time check. So the best way to pull him back really is to get an organised chase behind him.
And that's exactly what it isn't here, because they're climbing steadily. They're leaving a Lotto man on the front. And with every respect to Lotto, they don't produce the best climbers in the sport. And so there's a real indication here that the action is not yet coming. There's an interesting observer.
I would say definitely not a time for horseplay.
Indeed. Meanwhile, Evgeny Berzin thinking only of holding his speed steady and let the others come and go behind him. He slowly nudged his lead out towards that 3 minute mark, and he's still in the lead too, and the kilometres are ticking down.
They certainly are. Once they get to the top of this climb, the Côte de l'Orsay, they'll have just 50 kilometres remaining before the finish. And then I think the speed will start to pick up over the top of here, because we've got a 15-kilometre stretch taking us down to the Côte de la Redoute.
Well, certainly once we get to La Redoute, we'll know if Berzin is going to see Ans before everybody else, because that's the climb, and that is the one. If he's got a good lead over the top of that, then he will be in with a real chance. It's a brute of a climb, requires a low gear to get over it. And here's Baranowski now. Have they given him a chance? It's good to see a US Postal rider in the camera lens this time around, because they're not having the best of starts of the season, unlike last year. But perhaps it's sometimes better you make a more sedentary start and then you come up and deliver the goods in the races that matter later, like the Tour de France, for example.
Certainly, Dariusz Baranowski last year was the overall winner of the Redlands road race, a big stage race over in California. And at the moment, no reaction still coming in the main field, but starting to get a lot more consistency of the ASICS CGA riders coming up to the front there, thinking about their man Michele Bartoli, because now is the time when Bartoli needs to come to the front just a little bit more. As you can see, looking over his shoulder there, Michele Coppolillo, to see the position of his leader in the main field, because one thing you don't want to do is put the pressure on at the front too much if you're in fact team leader is too far down the main field.
Well, these two boys from ASICS are riding under orders from Bartoli, there's no doubt about that, and I think the orders are just keep him at a respectful distance, but don't worry too much about it, because they are waiting for sure for La Redoute, I think. And once that comes, then they know that the strong men can get away from this field and settle down on the capture then of Berzin. He's just gone over the top though of the Côte de l'Orsay, and now his next stop will be the Côte de la Redoute, and that is a brute.
Certainly, as you can see just how difficult the climbs are starting to get now. There's almost 2,000 feet of climbing in Liège-Bastogne-Liège. and that is on such a repetitive nature. It really does start to break the legs when it comes down to the end. None of the climbs are really very long. They're only around about 3 or 4 kilometers in length, but it's just the repetitive nature, one after the other, that starts to break the legs of these men.
Well, Coppolillo has got himself on the front at the moment, and the ever-powerful Udo Bolz is just behind him. And Seiko have brought themselves a couple of riders up here now. That's Mazzolini, Eddie Mazzolini, who we saw in that brief escape a few moments ago, and Salvadelli is the other man nearest the camera on the right at the moment.
Christophe Moreau, the Festina rider, also very close to the front all of the time here. They obviously feel that their man Laurent Dufaux has a very good chance today, because he rode excellently last week. Andre Schmeel, good to see him riding near the front, and on the far side Gianni Farazin, the Italian national champion, riding for Mapei. There's Frank van den Broek.
Sorry, you see the faces here. There's nobody really putting in any effort at all. This is just tempo climbing.
There's not too many people talking, though, as we look at the face of Laurent Dufaux. It's all very concentrated. Even the face of Mauro Gianetti there from the Française des Jeux. All of these riders now realizing in around about 10 or 12 kilometers, things are going to start getting very serious. The speed will start to go up. The organization will then come into the main field as everybody tries to place themselves in an ideal slot at 48 kilometers to go. And we realize then that the race certainly must be getting very hard.
Well, it's a nice round 30 miles to the finish. And remember that Berzin is probably a kilometre and a half to 2 kilometres ahead of this bunch on the road. So the riders still do it well. Now here comes an attack, and they're going to come from the depth of the body, and it looks like it might be Andre Schmeel, is it? From the Lotto team, who's gone clear. Once have got his number, and the Once riders, well, is it Schmeel?
That is Schmeel, and I don't think he was very happy with a comment coming from one of the spectators at the side of the road there, because I've rarely seen a move like that. He obviously was gesticulating quite aggressively.
Well, it certainly appeared what it looked like. Marcelino Garcia is the rider from Once who's managed to grab his wheel. Well, this isn't the sort of race we expect to see Schmeel doing too well in, but he's got the guts to give it a go. Now then. Well, he's given that well-known Belgian sign to a couple of spectators who must have said something, and let's hope the referees didn't see that, otherwise he'll probably find himself with a hefty fine by the end of the day.
Strange to see that, because after so many years as riding as different nationalities, in fact now Schmeel is riding as a Belgian.
Anyway, he's safely replanted back in the bunch. This looks like Salvadelli, who's continuing the attack.
Certainly is, but the shape of Michele Bartoli is coming to the front an awful lot more now. He's looking for some kind of move or some kind of control over the front of this main field, and I think he was probably looking over his shoulder there to try and mass his troops. That is Yvon Madio in the red pullover there, driving the Française des Jeux team car. So obviously Marc has decided to have a day out after being at the head of driving the car last week in Paris-Roubaix. These are the performances of Evgeny Berzin in the last few attempts at Liège-Bastogne-Liège. 1st, 19th, 41st and 11th. So he's always been there and thereabouts when it comes to this great Ardennes Classic.
Well, he's coming in off the mountains again. Nice bit of soft road for him to ride on before he'll go back up to the hills once more. The main roads tend to cut through the valley here, and then once you make a left or a right turn, you find you climb across the contours. He's certainly getting the feel for this race now. That's what we've done. 217, 47.8 to go. Hatzé is the area where we are, and then we've got the village itself, then Évailles, and then onto the Côte de la Redoute. The Côte itself starts alongside the main Charleroi-Mons motorway, and then it swings up very steeply as it turns away from the actual freeway there.
Looking at the pedaling action here of Evgeny Berzin, he certainly doesn't look like a man under pressure. He's riding a very sensible race at the moment, controlling his effort all the time, just making sure that he never pushes himself that little bit too far into the red zone, and keeping himself as comfortable as possible as he can, being in a lone breakaway. And these roads here that we're on at the moment, these very fast, flatter roads, are certainly to an advantage to the Russian rider, because he can get into his time trialing position and take advantage of the big power that he's got.
And with the roads, of course, completely closed, he's got the freedom of the roads, and you can see how he is using the apex of the corners, taking a lovely racing line straight through, just tightening his shoe straps there a little bit, stretching his legs. So he's probably a little bit uncomfortable then. This will be the longest break he's been in for a couple of years.
Certainly will. It's the most we've seen him on television, definitely, in the last couple of years. But it's good to see him back because he has been a very good performer in the last few years. 1994 when he won the Tour of Italy, but since then really looking to find some kind of consistency in his performances. And just taking on board here a drink known as Extran, which is a very high energy drink that a lot of these riders use. It's basically one packet of that drink is equivalent to 6 slices of bread.
Well, right, so he's not going to get hungry for the rest of the ride. Well, let's see what effect it has on him now. Here's the town itself as Harzé. Baranowski still out there at 2:25. The bunch are going nowhere at the moment at 2:50. And neither is Baranowski, you'd have to say, because he's just less than half a minute over the field. They're going to see him on these roads.
Certainly, unless you've really got big power, it's not worth trying to jump across a gap to a rider like Evgeny Berzin, especially when it's around about the 2.5 minute mark. So Baranowski really, once he'd found that he hadn't got 4 or 5 riders going with him, he should maybe have waited for the main field to try and renew his attack just a little bit later on.
Well, it will probably make more sense, but the fact is that once you get out front, you have the television cameras on you, you've got the crowd shouting your name. It's not so easy sometimes to sit up and wait for the pack. Now the bunch themselves are in the same village now, or the same town, that the 2 leaders have passed through already. Still just keeping, as they feel, control of this escape rather than hunt it down, because with the climb of La Redoute and then nearer the end 2 more climbs, I think they'll feel pretty confident they've got this race under control. Exactly who, we're not too sure yet, because there's still a number of riders who would be listed as favourites to win this race from this group.
One of those would be Laurent Jalabert, who today really seems to have calmed down his ardours just a little bit. A few years ago, in fact, he had tried to attack on the Côte de Haute-Levée, where Evgeny Berzin went away a little earlier this afternoon, and he really had overassumed on his strengths. He'd won the Flèche Wallonne just a couple of days earlier in a really dominant style, and I think he felt that he was invincible, and he attacked several times on the run-in towards Liège, and in fact ended up that he'd pushed himself just a little bit far from the finish and ended up really just blowing up completely.
Well, the Asics team are feeling pretty confident that Bartley will do it for them, because they're the ones keeping this in control. Now, at the moment, we've just seen Baranowski passed there by Nicolas Lauda. Pretty good sprinter is Lauda, but today he's decided to go and have a little dig out front himself for the Ballant team. He's showing good form at the moment, Nicolas. He went straight past Baranowski there. Baranowski, I don't think, took up his wheel. Well, we've got Berzin still out in the country, approaching a 3 minute advantage. Looking now as sharp as he did when he rode to victory in the time trial in the Giro d'Italia 4 years ago almost now.
An interesting move now. The Deutsche Telekom team coming to the front to start to organise their chase just a little bit. They maybe feel that Udo Bolz has a chance of doing something this afternoon, but also starting a little bit of organisation. There are 5 riders from Asics in the top 10 positions there, so shortly they will be coming to the front and I think taking over the reins of the chase behind. Baranowski did recover enough just to get onto the back wheel of Lauda, so things now starting to look a little bit more serious. The time gap still going up, 2:35 to the 2 chasers and 2:55 to the main field, so Evgeny Berzin starting to get towards the amount of time that I think he needs if he's going to have a chance of winning this event this afternoon.
4 more climbs remain, plus the little climb up to the finishing line itself, which, should Berzin still be clear by then, he won't worry too much about. The Rabobank boys in orange and white also passing the food around amongst themselves, because Michael Bogart there, very much a Rabobank rider, but wearing the colours of red, white and blue, the champion of the Netherlands. As we see now, Berzin scorch around that right-hander. He's got the whole road open to himself at the moment. This will be in the town of Rouvy now as we head towards the La Redoute. Only 4 kilometres away. We'll soon be in the other town of Roumouchon. And once you're through and over the cobblestones there, you know you're in trouble. Or not, depends how good you feel.
Berzin looks very good at the moment. Every time he gets onto a safe, straight piece of road, he gets his arms and forearms over the top of those handlebars to get himself into a good, long, aerodynamic position. This young man, not only did he win the Tour of Italy in 1994, but he also won the white jersey as the best young rider as well, and wore the pink jersey for 19 days.
Just 43 kilometres left, so about 26.5 miles. And I think all of a sudden, with the proximity of La Redoute, there is now a new urgency in the chase. So we're now making our way towards the start of the climb of the La Redoute. It's really a back entry approach, this. You sometimes feel that you've been sent off course as you go down the narrow road through Roumouchon. Then all of a sudden you go under a road bridge and you're on this concrete climb, which gradually gets narrower and much, much more steeper.
Berzin now starting to get out of the saddle. The race so far this afternoon has been very fast indeed. The average speed up around about 39.5 kilometres an hour, almost 25 miles an hour for a race over this kind of terrain. So once we start to go over the last few climbs, it's going to make 1 or 2 sore legs.
Well, we've never had a Liège-Bastogne-Liège in excess of 40 kilometres an hour, so it could be we're on a record ride today. Still about the same. 2 minutes 55 seconds the gap back to the main field, with a couple of guys in between, but it's over. Not in the between now because they're right on the front of the bunch. They've just been swept up, so they've got everybody except Berzin, and they're making ready now for the ascent of La Redoute. Enormous crowd as always on the top of this climb, because it is really a difficult climb. There's the contour, 19%, which is albeit 1 in 5. And it only goes up to the 160 metres, but virtually from sea level, and it does that in just 1.6 kilometres.
You can see the urgency at the front there. 1 or 2 riders suffering at the back because of the speed that's been set by the ASICS team at the front. A lot of the top leaders now moving to the front of this pack, and I did in fact catch sight of Luc Leblanc there riding for the Polti squad, looking very aggressive, trying to keep himself up in the top 5 or 6 positions.
This is the start.
Ideal position for Evgeny Berzin, because he doesn't have to fight his way to the bottom of the climb. All he has to do is negotiate those 1 or 2 little corners, and he can ride it now at his own tempo. But it will be interesting to see just how much time he's going to lose, because he will certainly ride this climb a lot slower than the main field behind, because they'll be attacking and trying to break up that main peloton. So he could lose between 30 seconds and a minute on a climb like this.
On the right of the picture there, the main freeway, which doesn't allow parking, and the cars all stopping to watch the race go by. That's the main road from Brussels down through to Charleroi and Mons. And now Evgeny Berzin on this very nice stretch of road, which doesn't look that steep at the moment, but it hurts. But it gets even worse as he starts to move up towards the summit, because the actual finish now is a way over to our left.
He's still looking very comfortable. There's no urgency at all in his pedaling style. There's no rolling of the upper part of his body, indicating a certain amount of fatigue starting to creep in. And coming to the bottom of the climb, the main field now led by, I think, Stefano Zanini from the Mapei squad, but a lot of riders from ASICS CGA up there as well.
Now look at the crowd here. They put barriers up here this year to keep them all back, but they're pretty orderly, and they're cheering Evgeny Berzin on the climb. But now the determination of the big peloton. We shouldn't see a huge bunch at the top of this one. There's Berzin as the road gets narrower and steeper. And now if we could just see the whole picture here, because I think that the main field is beginning to split up. They've got a teammate on the front for Mapei. Paul thinks it's Zanini, trying to rip them apart here. Vandenbroek is not too far off the pace. He's in 5th place. And I'm quite sure that Bartoli is going to be up there. Oh, and they're just about squeezed through there. And look at this crowd. This is the piece that hurts just here now. And little Evgeny Berzin is going superbly well. They're going to have to hunt him down, because I don't think he's going to come back to them right now.
So now the work being done by ASICS on the fronter. Paolo Bettini making sure that he keeps the speed as high as possible. In 2nd position, his own teammate Michele Bartoli. Frank Vandenbroek in the white jersey there, moving forward as well. Good to see on the left-hand side, Laurent Dufaux.
Well, there's 3 big names to conjure with now at a crucial stage of Liège-Bastogne-Liège. The one man we haven't seen, Paul, is Laurent Jalabert.
That's interesting because Jalabert knows this part of Liège-Bastogne-Liège very well indeed. We haven't even seen very much of his team that he used to great effect the other day in Flèche Wallonne, but for the moment they've not been very close to the front at all. Berzine now on a slightly easier part of the climb here, getting a chance to recover, but we've still got a little bit more to go to the summit.
Well, this is turning out now to be a storming race here as Bettini tries to take Bartoli into the lead. He's doing his best here. Van den Broek is in very, very close proximity. 2:20, the gap has come down. They haven't pulled back that much.
They haven't pulled back that much, but he's already lost 20 seconds on the first part of this climb here. One of the riders from Casino moving up there. I think that's Rodolfo Massi, and there, finally, the yellow jersey of Laurent Jalabert coming into the picture.
And Jalabert playing a watching rather than a dictatorial role now in Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Not a teammate in sight around him. And Bartoli has called up the troops. Bartoli, the winner of this race last year.
Looking very comfortable there, looking around just to see what the faces of the other riders in this group are showing. Another steep part of the climb, nearly the summit for Evgeny Berzine, but now Bartoli takes over the pace setting all on his own.
And just look at the way he's dancing on those pedals. Looks a little bit like Laurent Jalabert when he's climbing at the moment. They are just about a kilometre behind the leader on the road, because if they pass the kilometre board, Berzine has gone over the summit. Bartoli is now trying to pull a group clear here. This will be the big effort. Van den Broek is hanging on in there too. Steepest part of the climb just about now. Way in the distance you can see the freeway that was on the shoulder not very long ago.
It's good to see Frank van den Broek up there, still managing to match the moves of Michele Bartoli. A lot of question marks over his chance to ride the 265-kilometre race here at Liège-Bastogne-Liège, because after all, he's still only 23 years of age.
But what a season he is having. Paris-Nice, Gent-Wevelgem on his belt, second in Flèche Wallonne. Now he's third over the top of the climb. And Michael Bogart is also alongside. Jalabert has moved smoothly back into the frame.
I think I caught a glimpse there as well of Francesco Casagrande riding for the Cofidis team. So a serious little group starting to move to the front here, but the strongest man at the moment is certainly Michele Bartoli. Always still got the ability to look over his shoulder and see what sort of damage his attack is doing.
Well, he's obviously had the miracle cure for bronchitis, because he wouldn't get up La Redoute with a bad chest today, I can assure you of that, as he stomps up towards the summit now.
Well, Jaja's played a very clever game. We haven't seen very much of him for the whole day now, and he's moved up to the front at the right time, just as they come to the Côte de la Redoute. This is the sign of a very experienced professional. He's marked all of the moves, and now he's going clear with Michele Bartoli.
Well, he's been isolated from his team, and he's had to use his head rather than his legs, I think, because a lot of riders will think he hasn't got the great form because he didn't show it in Flèche Wallonne. In fact, he showed the opposite. So with no team around him now, he's going to have to work something out. Now he's taking a good look at Bartoli, and I wonder if he said anything to say, look, we've got the gap, let's try and go together. There's Bogart trying to get across.
Just in front of him, Francesco Casagrande, and having a lot of difficulty, Frank van den Broek.
So we've got still Berzine, remember, out front. And then we've got these guys trying to pull them back. And this is Casagrande who is joining from the Cofidis team.
He's actually starting to perform pretty well this year. They actually brought him into Cofidis towards the end of last season to try and bolster their chances of doing a good ride in the Tour de France. But Bartoli's gone again. He's no holding him.
Well, I think Jalabert forgot to mention that bit to him, because he obviously wasn't ready for it. And Bartoli has gone off by himself. This man just loves Liège-Bastogne-Liège. This is his classic. And now he's launched another big attack. Here's how he did it. Jalabert thought, I can't go. He's looked over his shoulder. Casagrande's come round Jalabert. But really, I don't think Francesco had the legs just then, because he just crossed the gap from the main field up to the lead group. So Michael Bogart, who was so much in the action in Flèche Wallonne, is now having to do some of the work here in Liège.
Well, that was a fine piece of attacking riding there. I think he just wants to make sure that once we get over the top of this climb, the group can reform and have a certain advantage over what was the rest of the main field, which is why he leapt out of the front there. He doesn't certainly feel that he can ride all the way up to Evgeny Berzine on his own at the moment. Just tucked on the back there is Francesco Casagrande. And Frank van den Broek has recovered, and he is there now in third position on the road in the white jersey.
So we now have 5 riders down there, with Jalabert hanging on to the back. And the Casino rider in the red shorts will be Rodolfo Massi. Here's that attack in close-up. The jaw set on Michele Bartoli. As the sun's not shining, you can't see at all where he's going, so he's just going to keep on just trying as best he can. Van den Broek had the perfect spot on his wheel here earlier on the climb, but obviously must have faded. He must have been taken right to his limits there.
Another man just got onto the back here, number 23, Laurent Dufaux. So now 6 men chasing Michele Bartoli, and a little bit further up the road, Evgeny Berzin.
And there's Bogard. Having a great season, Michael Bogard at the moment. 7 riders now. There they are. Well, 6 of them anyway. The one we're missing, of course, is Bartoli.
V. Zalma, and then that 5, 4, 5 and 6 repetition of climbs there are the very difficult climbs of Haute-Levée, Le Rosier, and then on to climb number 9, the Côte de la Redoute. An extra climb put back in this year, the climb of the Haute-Levée, which is going to make it very difficult in that middle section of the return up to Liège.
So 2 climbs on the way south, a nice gentle warm-up to this beautiful part of Belgium, and then there are 10 climbs on the way back. And the Côte de la Redoute is an absolute brute, but there are more than 70 riders getting up there to the base of that climb last year, and that could be the reason why the organisers have made the route this year one of the hardest in recent times. The finish at Anse itself is up a hill as we now look down on the riders. As I say, about 100 kilometres to go. We're waiting for final confirmation on that. I'll quickly give you the names. The breakaway started at 30 kilometres today. Stefan Wessermann of Germany getting clear, and the Discovery Channel team rider from Spain, Benjamin Noval. They were quickly joined by Koen de Kurt of the Liberty team, Johan Verstrepen of Lambau Credit, Walter Benito of the Boyga team from France. Maximum lead of 8 minutes 20. Last check we got, it was down to 5 minutes 10. Bob.
5 minutes 10 seconds lead. Benjamin Noval having a good day for the Discovery Channel team. We saw him do a fantastic Tour de France last summer in support of Lance Armstrong's 6th win and record-breaking win in the Tour de France. Benjamin Noval, a very strong bike racer. Been rather quiet so far this spring, but it's great to see him out on a breakaway with none other than Stefan Wessermann of the T-Mobile squad. Both Discovery and T-Mobile looking for some serious results in this year's edition of Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Very tough bike race, lots of hills, the oldest classic, and an absolutely gorgeous race. And so far we've had great conditions.
These are the 5 leaders, and they're now just starting the early slopes here of the Côte d'Ouane, and I think they'll begin to realise that behind the main field will start to whip up the pacemaking. They had a maximum advantage of 8 minutes and 20 seconds, but very shortly that's going to start to tumble, because again this is what we call the early morning breakaway. They've been at the front of the race now for around about close on 200 kilometres.
On time.